It's Carl Kennedy from The Rods, and you're watching Aftershocks TV. Carl Kennedy from The Rods, and you're watching Aftershocks TV.
Well, and that begs the question, just to go into our next segment, about what's happened really to the fun in rock and metal. Right. I mean, that's another whole thing too, because I mean, I don't know about you, man, but I get these press releases every day, okay, and when I'm going through them, all I'm seeing is everything is about Satan, man. I mean, satanic. I mean, and it's like literally, because I'll sit there and go, okay, this sounds like a pretty cool band, and I go in there, and then they call her, she calls herself the High Priestess, so this is the High Priestess, or there's just all this satanic themed, and this is mostly in the rock, like the heavy rock stuff, not even so much metal. Metal's always kind of going to have that, I mean, you've got your vintage bands that are still around, like some of the death metal bands like the Deicides and Morbid Angels and stuff, obviously, that have always use satanic imagery and themes, but that's the thing too. I wonder if a lot of it too can be tied to the fact that rock and metal just isn't fun for this, these kids these days. I mean, unless you listen to old music. I mean, but at the same time, like I remember, I didn't, my dad would play, like I said, Zeppelin and everything to me, but I wanted to hear something that was new. Everyone, as a kid, you always want to hear your generation's music, and so sure, these younger kids can go back to our music, from the '80s, the Def Leppards and the Motley Crues, but it sounds outdated to them, and I get it. But there's nothing fun in these newer bands, I mean, at the same time, I was kind of looking back at it. I was looking back at metal, and looking at just to see if, like, okay, just going back to starting with Black Sabbath. Well, Black Sabbath, right? They'd all started because they wanted to create music that was like a horror movie in music. Yeah, that was what Tommy Iommi said, right? So okay, so if you look back to the roots, it was always kind of dark themed metal. Judas Priest started out that way. I think really the fun in metal didn't come obviously until the '80s. I mean, British Steel, when you had Breaking the Law and Living After Midnight, right? It was about rebellion, it was about debauchery, and it was about fast cars and women and just having a good time. Yeah, right. And it started really in the '80s. I mean, British Steel, I think, was when it kind of started. And I did read, I was looking into that, and Rob Halford said that they started to change that a little bit, and a lot of it was because they toured with AC/DC in '79. And she says we were probably influenced by that. I think they were influenced. So in a lot of ways, I mean, AC/DC could kind of be responsible for bringing a lot of the fun to rock and metal, because really historically, except for that 10-year period really in the '80s, metal has been mostly, except for here or there, you had a Pantera that was a little bit like that too. Right. It's mostly always dark, I mean, but it wasn't satanic. The satanic thing is what's really interesting now. It's like you had obviously, when you think of satanic bands with metal, you think of Slayer, you think of Venom, you think of Merciful Fate, right? Those are like sort of the three that come to my mind. Sure. When it started, becoming more prevalent in the mid '80s there. Then, of course, like we said, death metal with the Deicides, Morbid Angels a little bit later. But it really, now it's everywhere. It's all Satan is Satan. Where it's like, sometimes that's cool. I have no problem with that. But it's like, when that's all there is, now I got a problem. We're missing the fun. That's just my point.
Yeah. It's a good point. I think you're right about that. I mean, like, obviously, AC/DC in the late, 78, Power Age 79, Heaven and Hell, Highway to Hell. Mm-hmm. And obviously then what happened from then onwards. But then I guess, Van Halen, like David Lee Roth, I mean, they were 76, 77 touring Pasadena and all that kind of area of California. And then obviously, their first album jumped in '78, and then that was it. The Sunset Strip was born literally on the day. And even, David Lee Roth stole it from Jim Dandy before that. So that was all building up to that. But you're right about that. But even a lot of the newer music, even like the new, I was listening to the new Saxon album. I can't even remember the name of it now, but I mean, that's called hellfire and damnation. And I mean, seriously. And Saxon are nowhere. And first of all, it's a superb album, but even the name of that is just metal. You know, it's very kind of even Man of War-ish. We were talking about that a couple of weeks ago. But you're right about that. I mean, look, metal is what it is. But I think there was the fun years, but then they just became. This is when I just fell in love with rock and metal. This is my age and my period, but from 82, 83 onwards, when I really and I dived into the metal scene in like the whole glam scene, and I had my hair dyed blonde, and I was like, you know, one of the very few, myself and my buddies were kind of laughed at because we thought we're Joey Tempest and John Bon Jovi walking around our small little town of Waterford. Oh, these fucking idiots! But whatever. But you know, I think we had those 10 years of fun, stupid, whatever, but I'm glad they happened. But you're right, now it's gone full circle again, and bands are all angry, and they have been angry. They're not angry again, no pun intended on Megadeth, but they're not angry again. They're just angry. You know, it's just it's all vicious and, you know, deathy and all that kind of stuff. But it is what it is. I don't take the imagery too seriously. It's important. Sure. I get it, but I just like to wake up every day, look at my phone, and I said, I wonder what Apple gave me for free today. Who dropped in? Oh, hey Bruce. You know, let's throw this on. So, you know, as long as you're into the music, you know, if you see it as being angry, and a lot of it is, and I love the death stuff, as you know. Sure. But I can jump back. I can jump back to you know, Autograph and Slaughter and Bullet. Maybe not Bullet Boys. Take that back. Take that back. And certainly not bands like Faster Pussycat and those bands. Like, Jesus Christ. I mean, wow. Just wow. So let's not have Faster Pussycat on this because they are the shittiest. Bob Nalbandian hated that band. I do remember that.
Oh, he did? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't a huge, you know, they're okay. I mean, but like I said, but I loved that seed, man. I mean, as a kid, if it really wasn't for the glam stuff, I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't be in rock. I still would be in rock and metal. I mean, I was, you know, born in it. My dad was a drummer, and, you know, it was all around me, you know, but that scene, what I fell in love with was just, like I said, like you said, I was the same way. I mean, Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Twisted Sister, those three records, you know, the Stay Hungry, Pyromania, and Shout at the Devil were like really what got me. And then, of course, it went to Dio and then Maiden, and then it just germinated from there. But it really started with that fun, rebellious thing. You know, like I said, I mean, of course there was, I mean, Motley Crue, you know, had, you know, their satanic imagery with the pentagram and stuff on Shout at the Devil. But when you listen to the songs, they balanced it well. I think that's the difference too. It was a balance. You know, yeah, you had your, you know, debaucherous song, you'd have your love songs, you know, your ballad, you would have your angry, you know, pissed off songs, you'd have, you know, it was like 4 or 5 sort of different themes that was kind of, you know, I guess congruent with most of all the metal bands at that time. Quiet Riot's Mental Health, you know, same thing. That was the biggest one, obviously, the first one to go to #1. And so I was just, that at least just was what grabbed me. You know what I mean? And so I'm just thinking, like, I'm thinking for a lot of these younger, you know, fans, it's like they don't have any of those. They don't have that crew or that Def Leppard, Twisted Sister.
I don't care. That's the thing about it. We cared. Like we religiously bought the magazines. Kerrang was every Thursday. Kerrang was out, and I, you know, collected Kerrang from 82 to mid 90s when it really got really shitty and indie and stuff like that. So I just stopped buying it. But I subscribe, to Rock Candy magazine. I think that magazine is incredible. It's talking about modern bands, but they just take interviews, or they take Pyromania, the real story, Saxon, Power and the Glory, the real story, and they have interviews with Biff today talking about the album then. So it's I urge anybody who the old kind of metal edge collector here in the US, Kerrang in England, Ireland, Europe, whatever. So Rock Candy magazine is a classic publication. I love it.
Yeah. So when did, this is a question about black metal in Europe. When did you first come privy to black metal?
You see, I was aware of black metal probably with Venom. So Venom, I actually met Cronus once in London, surprisingly, and I was with I was never a black metal fan. I kind of like it more now than I did before, but back in the day, I just completely avoided. That was noise to me. So when people hear black metal today, this is what I felt then, because I was into, you know, Striper, Leopard, Motley, whatever. But I was in London. Oh, Jesus, this would have been 86, 85. I was 15, 16. And a couple of my buddies were walking in London, Trafalgar Square, Piccadilly Circus, whatever. And we saw Cronus walking. I says, holy shit, boss, is that Cronus in Venom? So we stopped him. And do you know what I had on? I had a striper T-shirt on.
Nice.
So I had a striper T-shirt on, talking to Cronus. Of course, he looked down and went, "What's with the T-shirt?" Whatever. So I had to pretend I was a fan, and I wasn't. I was kind of intimidated. But we had a conversation. But we had no camera phones and shit. That would be a cool photograph to have. But you know, but black metal it was all over Crying. Like Crying magazine. You got to remember, this was the Bible in Europe, was the Bible. And actually Richie on Focus on Metal, if you go back a couple of years ago, he did a whole sequence, 6 or 7 episodes on Crying magazine, and he put a lot of work into it and got in touch with all of the photographers, the contributors, the reporters, the writers. Go back into the 1980s and talk to him today about then. Phenomenal segment. It just great job. But you know, Crying was so important that if you followed a particular contributor, if he said this album is going to go, yeah, it's going to be good because he said it is, and most times it was. And so, but black metal, in credit to Crying, they never really went with a genre. They covered all genres. They covered a lot of death metal and black metal, and obviously it wasn't as big as it is now. There wasn't as many bands around, but I was very aware of it just from Crying magazine, and I would read the interviews with various different bands, but I never went to it. As the years went by, I kind of went back into it, probably starting with, I don't know if you call it behemoth black metal. I don't really think they are. There's elements of
there's elements,
black.
And
then, but when I saw Mayhem this year. It was fantastic. I was going, Jesus, and I said, am I liking black metal here? I wasn't even aware that I was going to like it as much as I did, and all the imagery I just find laughable. But the music, I have to admit, I do like it. Now but see, here I go again, listening to metal for 40 odd years, and I'm discovering another genre because now there's bands in there that I don't know about. I can go back and take a look at it, you know?
Yeah. Black metal is just one of those interesting genres. Like you said, I mean, yeah, I guess you could kind of line it a little bit with death metal. Maybe just the, at the time at least, the more of the European version of death metal. But I always love that that Alice Cooper quote when he talked about, meeting some, black metal kids. And then he's like, oh, hold on, I have to go to my grandmother's house or something, like, or my mom's over here if she's picking me up, because they come out like they're these, big, tough, dangerous kids, and then they're little mommy and stuff. Yeah. So I always got a kick out of that. But, black metal. It's just, like I said, it's, and you're right about Kerrang, man. It's funny because Kerrang, it was probably about, in the 90s, we actually started getting Kerrang in the States. I remember in New York, it used to come in the Tower Records stores, and I'm like, what is this? And I remember being like, wow, this is an amazing magazine because, like you said, had everything in there.
Oh, yeah.
Where the U.S. magazines really just kind of focused on most of your popular bands. You didn't have a lot. So there's a lot of underground bands from here in the States, for instance, that were big in Europe that they would feature in Kerrang that they would never even come close to touching here. And so I always loved Kerrang. I mean, Malcolm Dome, obviously, he's the rest in peace. Awesome, he was the man. I mean, there's no one better than him. Probably my favorite journalist ever. Up there with him and Bob were like two of my real, two guys that really I think were the real purveyors of metal for whether Europe or America. But so it's just something I wanted to talk about a little bit. It's just really
good topic, my friend.
I mean, I just would love to see a little bit more fun. I mean, like humor's good. Like one thing about death metal, which is great, like Cannibal Corpse and so forth, they're very humorous. You know what I mean? It's like humor gorecore stuff. You know what I mean? It's all. It's fun. It's just a horror themed thing, but it's not obviously anything to take seriously. I just think that's what it is. A lot of bands they're taking themselves way too seriously these days. That's the one thing I look at sometimes and like, ease up a bit. Just enjoy it. You know what I mean? Enjoy it. Don't take yourself too seriously. It's all for fun,
Yep. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So anyway.